Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the OGX Podcast. I am hosting today, your host Ashley Sunshine. Welcoming back as our my counterpart today, our strength and conditioning coach James. James, welcome back to OGX Podcast.
Hello, thank you.
So a couple weeks ago, I don't know, I felt like our last episode together was kind of a hit. We got so many questions, not just from outside people that we don't know, like on YouTube and such, but like even our internal people, would say things like, I listened to this, I heard you say this, what does this mean for this? Can you explain my program based on what you talked about? Which I was like, this is cool. Obviously the point of this is to educate, to facilitate discussion. So yeah, I think that we planned on coming back to a topic like this. Anyway, and then last week's topic, it was me, Laura, and Krista on the episode, and we really talked about answering one of our listeners, our viewers' questions, which was about I hear you on the power concept. I hear you that the traditional ways of training pitching to overthrow and to be exhausted and to run 3 miles and all of that is anti-power. I hear you. But it's also an endurance. How do you train for the workload and the endurance component? So we talked about that last week. I think you wrote a response. Did you write a response for YouTube for that?
Yeah, I gave Paul the response to that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. As did I. And so we just kept referencing in the episode last week, we should have James weigh in on this. So here you are now in the flesh, sort of virtually, but we'd like you to weigh in on it. So can you talk to me and whoever's listening, obviously, to this episode about how you responded to that question? Obviously, since it's not just a response on YouTube, feel free to elaborate a little bit more, but help us understand this concept of endurance. It is very unique to be able to produce power, but over and over and over to the extent where you're also training this endurance element.
Yeah, it's just trying to be shorter on YouTube. I mentioned just work to rest ratios. So the first thing is you throw you pitch the softball for about 1 second, and then you stand around for about 10 to 15 seconds. So it's not just a steady state 2-hour jog you're going for where your heart rate is sitting at the same thing. So the energy system that relies on that is your phosphocreatine system, your phosphagen system. And that is easily fatigable, but it's built up better through power repeatability and just being stronger in general. And so that's why we don't just go for really long, steady state runs. And there are other ways in training you can get similar aerobic adaptations without having to go outside for an hour and go for a jog.
Like what?
I like to keep the pace higher in the weight room. So it's not as super strict, but high intensity interval training, the raise in heart rate and the recovery associated with it within training produces the same metabolic adaptations you would get for endurance training without having to invest the time in endurance training. So through training through a higher intensity while you're training, it doesn't have to be specifically intervaled out like looking at a clock and going 10 seconds on, 20 seconds off. But if you keep the intensity high and push yourself like that, you'll get similar adaptations there. And then from just being strong in general will give you that bigger gas tank to operate out of. And the way that we have pitching training in the off season to build you up. So it's not just you need to go throw a ton to throw a ton. You go through an off season program where you accumulate volume so that you can handle, it's really not super realistic to be able to handle 400 pitches in a weekend.
Totally. That was something that Krista added last week. Let's also be clear.
Right.
There's some element where sometimes workload is so ridiculous that it's not the training's fault for not preparing for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Because you really shouldn't be doing that anyways. You should be on a staff. You should be thinking about the best interest of the developing child, not just we're going to go win the 11U tournament.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Of course it's fun, but it's long term. I personally don't care about the 11U championships. I will care about the NCAA championships and anything beyond that. So Like if you can build yourself up over time healthily with good patterns and
Yeah.
build that big gas tank by staying healthier and fresher and finding your way to a staff that understands workload management, you'll get into the postseason feeling a lot better than how kids limp to the finish line of the fall season after their arms hanging on by a thread.
Yep. My comment or sort of my response to this was really about, we do build volume in pitching. If we took this like a traditional off-season approach, volume comes way down. We're just assuming like they're beat up. So strength and conditioning really kind of takes the priority. Pitching really takes a back seat if we're just trying to really like reconnect the timing and the syncing of the arm and the body, like really foundational concepts. And then we start like building up. And there is an element where I do feel like there is a responsibility. I could not design training programs for pitchers where they're in preseason and they only throw 10 high intensity pitches and feel like we've done our job to prepare them. There is a reality where there's got to be some ramping up of volume. Generally, there's got to be some ramping up in volume also at high intensity in addition to moderate intensity as their season approaches. But I really do feel like the number one approach to being able to, it goes back to our velocity conversation. Like the way to have more velocity, the key to that is in the weight room. And then the best way to learn to express that power is in pitching, right? It's sort of like, it's like the tier 2 on top of the foundational concept, which is solid, like training of power. And then it's the same in endurance. Like the training of endurance is not by throwing 600 pitches a week for 4 months. The training of endurance is in what you're talking about, this training of repeatability of expressing power in its most foundational form. Like, remember, pitching is human movement. So train the body's ability to do that outside of the pitching motion. And then what we're really working on in pitching is not just like your ability to throw 100 pitches with your arm overhead. It's to be able to handle workload that's getting excessive, but to still be able to tap into your craft. Like pitchers can get in there and throw. This is why young pitchers get abused.
But not hit any types of spots or anything.
No,
like there's no finesse in it when you're 300 pitches into a weekend.
No. So what we are trying to train in pitching is to like, can we keep your craft maximized as volume keeps going up? Which is why when we design training, we're building volume. We don't just sit a pitcher at high intensity and she's just throwing 70 pitches straight. It's like, what are we doing? First of all, imagine an inning that throws 70 pitches. Pretty sure Sally would be pulled by now. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like that literally doesn't make any sense. For all pitching lessons where they just stand on the rubber and they throw high intensity just straight on for an hour, like, what are we doing? And so for us, we go back and forth because this, like, with breaks, first of all, but with moderate intensity and high intensity, because it's like, okay, the moderate intensity is the world where the brain really understands. It can feel where your arm is in space. It understands the timing, the syncing of the arm and the body a little bit more. And so we're trying to like reconnect to the maximization of the craft of pitching, hand position manipulation, like understanding just, this difference between timing of when the upper arm unloads into the lower arm. I mean, we're talking about like these very granular details that you've got to nail to be able to execute. Command, break, that is 8 inches versus 5.5 inches, changing speed. Like this is the craft. And so as volume builds and you are tired, not only does body position change, but your just general registration of where your hand is in space will go down. And so what we are trying to do is say, through strength and conditioning, you are going to have the ability you are going to train your body to be able to produce power over an extended period of time with breaks, because it's not continuous power. That's literally not a thing. Right?
You will hopefully throw like 15 pitches and then go sit on the bench. Like
exactly. And then in between the pitches, you'll have 10 to 15 seconds.
Right. Yeah.
So like there's also this element, right? And so it's like, okay, we're going to train your body to have the ability, forget pitching, but to be able to produce power repeatedly over a period of time. And then what pitching is about is you need to come already with that ability to do so. And then what we are trying to do is to get you to understand, like, what is pitching? And so the reason why I think it is very easy to overthrow an 11-year-old, as we commented on when we started, is because there's no craft at 11U. There is no craft at 12U. You know what those kids do? bless them. This is not they're all terrible. They get on the rubber from a shorter distance. The biggest, strongest, most athletic kids throw flames, and they have good body awareness, so they know where to put the ball. And maybe they have a good changeup. If you've got a good changeup, lights out. Everybody go home. That pitcher wins. There's no craft. The craft of pitching is something way beyond what pitchers are doing, what they're capable of doing at these young ages. So the craft doesn't go away on pitch number 248 if the craft never existed. You know what I'm saying? And so what we have to really understand is what we're training for when we're talking about higher levels of high school and into college is that that pitcher gets hammered when the ball goes here versus here. That pitcher gets hammered when the ball loses an inch or two of break. When the speed falls into, honestly, we sometimes have pitchers where when that drop ball is at 71, it loses its break. When it's at 67, that's the pitch we need. She's training herself to understand how to tap into those level of details.
But you're not just also throwing the ball as hard as you can every time you throw the ball. That's the craft. There needs to be the fluid portion of pitching.
Absolutely. And this level of manipulation and control over the manipulation. So I think, the reason why I'm let's have 8 podcasts in a row, James. I love these because I really think of where we start to understand, the community starts to understand pitching so much more. We have when you want to be a better pitcher, you need to live in that bullpen and you need to do everything in the bullpen versus this understanding of what is the general adaptation we need, training adaptation we need, and then how do we make sure we can pitch in that element? That's where pitching comes into play, right? And so, I said, it's not who cares about workload? No, we have to build a workload over season, not necessarily to train them to have endurance. That's on your side of programming. Ours is to be able to understand, can I be just as good at pitch number X? Not can I get to pitch number X? Can I be just as good at pitch number X as I was at pitch number Y? That's the difference to me.
Yeah. And all the other layers that are under it too, outside of training. Do not show up to the first of 4 games on an empty stomach at 8 a.m.
Right.
You're not going to get to the end of the day pitching how you want to pitch, how you believe you could pitch.
Right.
Especially not doing anything between games either.
Exactly. Think about all the conversations we talked last week about just velocity, but those hold for recovery, for being able to, we know that the youth game is set up for these athletes to have to pitch. They have 4 games in a day, right? On an average, 3 to 4.
Who the heck else is going to throw? Yeah.
Exactly. So I just think we have to think about this a little bit differently. I get so frustrated. And I've been watching a lot of postseason baseball. I will not be anymore because the Phillies are knocked out, and now I hate baseball for 2 weeks. Anyway, but that's another podcast. But I obviously been watching a lot of baseball recently because I'm a Phillies fan. I've been watching, and I'm it's just my brain can't help but I just really tune into the pitchers, and I want to know of when he's getting hit, what's going on. It's just the craft, while it's so different and it's the X's and O's, the concept of the craft is the same, right? And obviously I love that part of it. And so this world where in baseball we understand he's at pitch, okay, he is at 38 pitches in inning number 2. So we know the bullpen is going to get up earlier. Is that dude physically capable? We're literally, if you lose
he ain't going to 200 pitches in a complete game.
But why, right? Listen, it's the playoffs. If you lose today, your season's over. It is not just that, if he throws beyond X amount of pitches, we're afraid for his health and wellness. Everyone knows that at that stage of the season, if it's win or go, your season is over, you're willing to push beyond that. It's not that he's going to be incapable. His stuff will go away. His stuff will not be as good. He's not going to be throwing as hard. His command will deteriorate. He will not be able to break the ball the way he's normally. And so he will get hit, And so I'm we know this in baseball, but we always attach, because the culture of softball pitching has always been this basically it's a toughness. If an athlete starts getting hit in inning number 6 or game number 3, it's she didn't gut it out. She wasn't tough enough. She didn't compete hard enough. That pisses me off, James, beyond belief. I'm it is literally it is an impossible situation. it is an impossible situation. So I think what's so important, this education is so important, is like, okay, just generally we're approaching this concept of how do you train pitchers? They need to be power. How do you get power? What is velocity? Velocity is power. Like sometimes we don't even know that concept. Like, what are these concepts? How do you train it? And I think we can go into a little more detail too of like, how do you train power? And then like, okay, how do you keep train them to do this over time? And like, that doesn't live in the pitching coach's hands, right? And so our job is like, how do you maximize that pitcher? How do you teach her to keep doing that as fatigue is weighing, right? Your job is to get them to be able to like resist fatigue for as long as possible. Essentially train them to not tap into like, oh, I'm under so much fatigue that it collapses. That's what training is. And our job is like, how do you keep the craft moving along? And at some point, pitchers may say, I feel fine. But it's like, but your stuff isn't good anymore, right? You may feel fine, but your stuff is bad. You're going to get hit. Sally, sit down. It's Jenny's turn. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a reality of that. And I just think the more we can understand the culture that we're so readily able to accept in baseball holds true in softball. Success is not just if a kid wants it more. There's a craft here too. I feel like I should just like end the podcast on that mic drop. There's a craft here too, and it just doesn't get enough like recognition.
Yeah, right. It's ignored. It's like, because I don't know, they will still be nothing's gonna change today, but it needs to be said daily.
Yeah, like absolutely.
Yeah, because like we're gonna say this, and then in 2 days there will still be a kid that comes back to us saying they threw 400 pitches this weekend, and it's like
absolutely. So I think we've got this concept of like, how do you train power over time? Obviously, you're like work to rest ratios, being able to obviously build volume over. Okay. Hopefully at this point, it's pretty clear. Let's now get into a little bit more of the details and specifics about like how we train power. Like what does it mean? That is such a general concept of like training power. Let's say we have an athlete comes in for an assessment, moderate movement quality, maybe like, it's relatively stable, but needs some more single leg stuff, but it's sort of like the average in movement quality. We know she's going to make some improvements and gains as she gets into her programming. And power, we typically rely on two main power tests. It's their ability to throw and med ball. They lay on the ground. They have an overhead trunk throw. It's really like their ability to produce power through the front side of the body versus a broad jump, ground up type of power. Let's say it's relatively balanced in how she produces power. It's not like she clearly produces more power here versus here. It's relatively similar, but it's kind of mediocre, right? Nothing like, oh, big red flag. This is like, this kid has no power. But you've seen these graphs. You've seen how we visualize this, James. Is maybe she's just like not quite hitting thresholds of what's, above average, but she's right there. And we're like, hey, we actually expect her. She's going to go up. She's never really been in the weight room, not in the way in which she's going to be here. Tell me like what over the course of her, off season, what it would look like if we're like, James, when we come out of off season, this athlete, we need to make sure her power profile has made some improvements. What does that look like for her?
Well, there's just a couple things that go into that. So they're first, like how much they've ever been in the weight room before. So like if they've ever even been exposed to something like this, because early on, really the first adaptations they're going to make are neurological only. At this point, they don't have the skill associated with the movement to break down their tissue for it to be rebuilt back differently. So it's going to be just their body flopping around, like learning where it is in space, developing a single leg squat pattern, learning how to jump, me cueing, telling them what to do with their arms, because there are people that come in and be completely backwards on like just basic sequencing of how to do a broad jump. Like every time we do a movement assessment, you have to explain to them how to do a broad jump in the first place. So there's just so much learning that goes on to that. For somebody that we've had for a longer period of time, like the off season block, as soon as they start, when they come in early November, when this fall season's over, it has way more freedom to it for this first block. It's going to be getting them to move in a bunch of different planes and a bunch of different ways they haven't moved, just to kind of like hit a reset, try to like unravel some of the like competencies that or compensations that they've built through this huge season. And then we will like hit the ground harder with more like traditional patterns of like squatting, pushing, pulling, hinging, of just accumulating volume there. And then it's coupled with expressions of power. So like I'll do a contrast pairing of a push-up or a bench press, wherever that athlete's at, with a like med ball shot put variation. I will use their squat variation coupled with jumps and weighted jumps. And we do weighted sled sprints for, just to like build along the whole curve. But then it's also like for a lot of them, weight implementations aren't even like what you need to go to right away. Like talk about the motor learning, it's them using their body, how to do that, how to be intentional when they're doing it. When they go down into a broad jump, trying to push the ground away from them as hard as they can, as fast as they can. Even when you just cue that, you get 6 more inches out of the broad jump. Like that's what you need to be exposed to tell your brain and nervous system, okay, for us to be a different person in a week, you need to stress your body in a way you haven't before. So like you're going to need to be intentional. You're going to need to try to squat that weight with a purpose. We're not just going through the motions. So like a big question I'm asking all the time in the gym when somebody chooses a weight to do their goblet squat or whatever is, okay, if you were to do as many reps as you could in that set, how many more do you think you could have done beyond that 8 that you just did? And they're like, they got to think about it. I'm like, okay, do you think you could have done like 10 more reps of that? They're like, yeah, probably. And it's like, okay, you are nowhere near an intensity we need you to be.
Right.
Like, you're not teaching your body like to adapt to anything because you're doing something so sub-maximal, right? Like, you need to tell your body, oh, we need to change because we're going to be stressed. And if we don't adapt to this stress, we're going to not do okay. So your body learns, okay, there's going to be stress coming that I need to adapt to and I need to change to. And then you just use that, progress over the through the off season, and you start ramping things from volume to more intensity as you get closer to the spring. And then by the time they're in the spring, they're hopefully the strongest, fastest, most athletic, best moving version of themselves.
Yeah. And this really goes back to our initial conversation of like what you would not do if I was like, James, this athlete needs to get a broad jump number that's here. She wouldn't just spend like the entire time just like broad jumping.
Yeah.
Not,
right.
That's
not
like
the
it's
point. Yeah.
Right. You can't just take what she needs to do better and then just only train it. And honestly, like, we have athletes that train with us remotely, mostly not in-house, but mostly like remotely, who just do pitching. It's not a ton, but we do have a handful of athletes and they do strength and conditioning elsewhere. And listen, I am not here to say there's no other strength and conditioning in the whole entire country that, it like beats ours. That might be true, but I'm not saying you can't get what you need anywhere else. That's not the avenue I'm coming from here. But the reality is we see a lot of bad programming. I mean, we just do. And it's hard sometimes because we have athletes where they're like, I know I got to jump higher. And then they start reporting like, I've got some shin pain. I've got some knee pain. I've got some XYZ. I'm like, well, what's been going on? They're like, well, I've been training really hard. And then I'm like, well, what have you been doing? I know what you're doing in pitching. We're like, what are you doing in strength and conditioning side? And it's basically like, they're just attacking the actual movement. I mean, way overboard.
Yeah.
Just like all I do is jump because I have to jump. I'm like, but there's so much of a foundation that in my mind is the equivalent of you need to throw harder. So you are only going to throw at max intensity the entire training session and pitching.
There's so much underlying that feeds into your ability to broad jump. Like,
correct.
The skill of the broad jump is only like a piece of it. It's like the underlying mechanisms of you being able to produce a lot of force at in a very small amount of time in that plane of movement in a coordinated fashion is like, okay, then what feeds into that? You need to be strong. You need to not have energy leaks. You need to understand your body. You need to have like high rates of firing in your nervous system that you've developed over time and intentional structured training that has set you up to get to that point.
It's the same in pitching. It's like, okay, if we want someone to go up in velocity, but we never threw it high intensity, probably not going up in velocity, right? Because like we can't never throw it high intensity and then expect high intensity.
Yeah.
But if we only ever threw at high intensity, we know that that's not going to do it, right? That's probably just going to lead to like pain.
Yeah.
It's just like overdoing, like a movement and a skill at an intensity where you don't have the right foundation for. I mean, that's the same concept. So we see a lot of things like that. Another thing that we see, so what we have realized, and we used to collect all types of like different ways to collect power: vertical jump, sprint times, broad jump, med ball throw, rotational throw. And we just collected. It's like, we don't know what you need to be doing best, what correlates to pitching velocity. And then over time, we've collected enough data after years and years that we're like, okay, it's pretty clear. Pitching velocity is correlated, what we know, to broad jump numbers over the anterior med ball throw, which is correlated more to hitting exit velocity and overhand throwing. We don't individually like program for overhand throwing, but we know that the correlation is there. But what we also know is that in pitching, typically they need to be relatively like balanced, meaning if you have like a way below below average anterior core, essentially, that's not working in pitching as well. It needs to basically like hold its own. That med ball throw needs to be able to like, you produce enough power from the front, but you can't produce more from the front than the back. And if you do, you don't rotate well. We're in the air rotating and the front side of the body just takes over. So we've got to kind of work to like try to keep those as balanced as possible. And the reality is some athletes are more anterior dominant. They are, right? And we're not going to like fully balance that out or get you to jump. They're more anterior dominant, and that kind of goes on the pitching side of like, okay, how do we maximize her knowing she's like that? But we have run into a handful of athletes where they are doing strength and conditioning elsewhere. And, for the most part, again, this is not some sort of like nobody's strength and conditioning is any good. That's not what I'm saying at all. But we're the people that tie it directly and use our data to tie it to pitching.
I talk directly to you. Like, what's happening in pitching? I can see their pitching program. I can make decisions.
We know more. There's no, we know the most.
Right.
We can literally measure how it's translating to the ball. We measure how it's translating to the patterns of pitching. Like, there is a direct, is it working? Like, James, you can hang all the medals you want over that kid's neck, but it's not going to pitching. Something's not working, right? So like, we're not really in that world anymore like we used to be. That's how we got to where we are now. It's like, what even matters? How do you train? What do we need to be able to tackle? But we do see a lot of athletes where they produce so little power from the ground and they are out of control in power from the front side of the body. And it's a disaster in pitching. It is a disaster. And when they're like, I train power, it's almost always like my strength and conditioning coach is a football guy. It is this like anterior dominant, like offensive lineman approach of just like push power. So in your experience, whether it's like in graduate school, in just you've been around a lot of different sports in training and how people train power. Can you talk to me about some of the ways in which maybe you, before coming here, you would have thought about training our athletes and maybe things that have shifted? Maybe some things of like, why training it in this way may work in a sport like this and is not going to go to pitching. Can you kind of explain those concepts to us in a little bit more detail?
So like football loves cleans, right? And I think that those have a really good place in football. So it's like a rapid expression of power, and then you have to quickly turn it around and accept the power or accept force when you catch it on your shoulders, because football is a contact sport. You are trying to explode off the line, the initial expression of power, and then you're going to run into somebody at a really hard and high like rate of speed. And if you can't accept force like that, like a ton of force at a high rate of speed, your body's probably not going to handle that. So I think that cleans work really good for a contact sport. If progressed and taught appropriately and like worked up through all the progressions of cleans and is monitored and blah blah blah. But we don't have any contact, hopefully, in softball. Like that's never going to be the goal within a game of softball. Right. So I need to be able to just like produce force and accept force, but not in potentially compromising positions. And you can get such similar adaptations by not doing a clean. You can do a trap bar jump. You can do dumbbell weighted jumps. And again, it comes back to like what the athlete individually can handle. Because like I've worked with like college athletes and big, strong people that have like been in the weight room for 5+ years and all this stuff. But if like your kid can't jump on a 12-inch box and look good doing it, I'm not just going to throw a bar in their hands and be like, all right, we're going to learn this super complex movement and blah, blah. It's going to be, okay, we're going to learn how to use your body, and we're going to put in, like input little pieces of like a challenge by me putting 10-pound dumbbells in your hands, just like a little external influence to make your brain and body have to think a little bit differently about how you're going to move.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't, there's not just like a one size fits all, not like if a strength coach or somebody else is tied to one movement being at the mountain, like that's not how strength and conditioning should be thought of. That it should be, how can you meet the athlete where they're at and give them something to build them up along like their progression as an athlete and a person, small person.
I think we also see a lot of athletes where the power is very much in this like push type of like I'm trying to like press a lot of power. And I think, like you said, there might be a time and a place for everything. But in my experience, and you can weigh in on this, in our athletes where we've looked at the strength and conditioning program that they are following outside of our guidance, when it's so much sort of upper body dominant power, what my experience is that it really influences where they produce power from in a way that does not lead to velocity, while simultaneously oftentimes limiting the length that they have overhead. Right? Like their inability now, they have so much like tight, essentially like their upper body, their chest becomes so, there's so much tension there is what I'm getting at in their motion. That's not how the pitching motion works. The upper body, the goal essentially from chest up is to stay very loose and relaxed. It's really not a ton of tension. We're trying to really keep the tension from ground up through like waist. Is like where we're holding tension so that the upper body can then come through. And so in my experience in our athletes who's the way in which they're going for power is a very upper body dominant approach here. It backfires in pitching, and not to say that like that can't ever be done, but that's not
a 5'10",
motion
200-pound like. Kid could maybe get away with that because they just are big and stronger than everybody else. But like you're looking at the bell curve of the average kid we're gonna get somebody that's 5'5", 130 pounds maybe. Like if you are going to be a different person in the circle, you need to be able to do things other people aren't doing or like can't do. So like when somebody doesn't know how to use their legs, like pushing off of the rubber, like that's just such an easy place to like help them figure it out. Like get connected with your lower body, make moving with your lower body, like work hard at that in the weight room so it's easier to do on the rubber.
I think it is the answers to any of these questions, it's like it's not a secret. There's no like we know something you don't know. Like it's actually quite simple. And the challenge is that it takes time to develop. And the early stages of that development of any training adaptation are not sexy. That's just the reality of it. Like you have to put in the slow, gradual work for it to eventually look like this is a session that I want to film and put on social media and look like a rock star. And I think that we have this approach in our game. We put a culture on where like people think they are running out of time. They don't have that time. My daughter's 12. I don't have that time. You know what I'm saying? And we're like, what the hell? Like everything is a sense of urgency. Like she's not going to make the 13U team if she doesn't start throwing 61. I'm like, huh? So the reality is it's not a secret. We're not unsure of how to train power. It's actually quite easy. And honestly, I think for us, we have yes, been able to collect like an amount of data that now tells us where power needs to come from, what type of growth this many inches looks like average velocity. When you can jump like this, like if an athlete can jump, 95 inches essentially, you know what I'm saying? Like, or 95 feet, excuse me. I don't know how we measure it. 95 inches in broad jump and feet in our in our throw. Yeah. If we're going 95 inches, then basically it's like, and she throws 60. I'm like, we have a problem. Like, this kid has the power, and this is such a clear way as I'm doing assessments. This is such a clear way to see that, like, she can't express that power versus this kid jumps 68.
50? Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she's in college and she's trying to throw 65. It's like she doesn't have that. So there is a layer. I'm not trying to say, we don't have anything.
Or else she's like stressing her arm to get that 65 like crazy because she's just like,
ripping it. So she's hurt. She's got pain. And probably not. She's probably not getting. She's probably doing that to hit 60.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, she's not doing that to hit 65. She can't. She can't. So we have a level of information now of like how to specifically attach where power needs to come from in the body, how much power you need to produce from the front side of the body versus ground up approach, ground through hips. What are the thresholds? When you have this, typically you are throwing velocities like this. Do we have it? Like, we have more data than people. But as far as like how to train athletes to get better in power, you didn't have to work here to learn how to do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are, so I think what the concept is, like, we have to just get away from thinking that the development of what we're going for in pitching, the velocity, endurance, whatever these goals are, that we have to get away from detaching them from what goes on in strength and conditioning. Your ability to do any of it lives in the strength floor.
Yep.
Your ability to maximize it in the motion, you got to bring it to the table, and then we can maximize it. If you don't have it on the table, we can't do anything. And so I think that's the piece there. It's just the secrets on how to development. They're slow and steady. You've got to take your time. And what you're saying is, not only do you have to bring it to the table in pitching, you've got to bring it to the table. And if you don't bring it to the foundational movements to the table in strength and conditioning, we'll start there.
Yeah. If you don't, it's not.
And that's
like,
great.
Not a problem with that. It's like, just admit, like, or it's not even admitting. It's looking at your 60-inch broad jump and the professionals you were coming to and paying money to and are telling you, like, you came to us, you bought the assessment, we're telling you, like, you do not have the physical qualities to allow you to pitch the way you want to pitch. Go spend some time in a quality S&C program, ours or somebody else you trust, whatever, and we'll talk to you in a year. Like,
that data, I'm thinking about like the last page of a report that we get, which is movement quality, power. It is a roadmap on what to train, how to target training. You're an athlete. Like, do we see athletes that have terrible movement quality and crazy power?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. They have a genetic, innate ability to produce power, and it's like, way to go. That is awesome for you. And honestly, these elite level power kids, these big velocity professional athletes, it is highly unlikely that they were low power kids in high school.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they didn't train their way. Their pitching coach didn't teach them how to go from 55 to 70.
Yeah.
They produced an innate level of power that was like, you are above average. Now, the freaking challenge of that is that your foundation is about to crumble.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're in, like, all the volume and everything that you're, like, trying to put performance on top of. Like, you don't have the foundation to support it. But even then, the people with, like, you should not look at an Oklahoma pitcher that can just produce power but move like shit and compare yourself to them. Like, there is a bell curve of life. 68.3% of people are in the middle of this bell curve. You got the 1%ers at the top, you got the 1%ers at the bottom. If we roll the dice, the chances of you being in that top 1%, they're not in your favor. So you're going to have to do other things to get there. You can't train like Michael Jordan in the weight room and everything else and expect to be Michael Jordan. Unfortunately, Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan because Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan.
There's so many elements. But
there are things, like you just need to, like, get coaches that you trust, like, in a system, listen to what they're telling you to do, and give it time, and you need to give it effort. Like,
which is also why you can't show up to a strength and conditioning class and 5 athletes just follow the exact same thing without anyone having any idea. Like, here's the general program for all people. Like, I get it. It's better than nothing,
sure,
right? Like, if you do a team strength and conditioning, is that better than if you didn't do anything? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's like, let's assume everyone's at a foundation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely a place for things like that. But we're talking about maximizing an individual athlete. We have athletes that come and are like, you have amazing power profile. That's great for you. But if you're not already in pain or experiencing some sense of like discomfort, you are going to. You can't have that much fuel in the fire without the foundation.
Yep.
We cannot just keep training power until you die, because this is not the approach. We've got to really hammer getting you a better foundation to keep you safe, because no one cares if you throw 70 if you're sitting on the bench. 70 doesn't do any good in the dugout, right? Because you're hurt and you're in pain. So it's like, okay, so there's that world. And we do see athletes like that. Are they they're not, we don't see a ton, but we do see them.
Mm-hmm.
I see them at the college level where I'm like, I know why this kid has made it to where she has.
Yeah.
She throws flames and she's got a good drop, but she has arm pain all the time. Her back hurts all the time and everything's red. Like, she can't move.
And she's 5'10", 180.
Yes, right. Yeah. And exactly. They are 5'10", 180. Yeah, they are 5'10", 180. Okay, so, okay, and then essentially, but most people are coming in just mediocre at both, is what we're saying, right? They're just coming at mediocre at both. And so their approach looks a little bit different in what we're targeting. So when we assess the movement quality piece, it's like, this is exactly where you are. Are you below average, average, or above average in power? Where are you between power from ground up versus front of the body? And where are you with how well you move? And like, then we can write a program that just goes exactly where you are.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying, is like, just see exactly where you are and then target it.
Yeah. It's not even the craziest, fanciest thing ever. Like 80% of the programs I'm writing at a given point, like, have like 80% of all these programs have like the same thing. And then there will just be a different tweak or intent of a very similar movement to like work on that individual's little thing they need help with, to like open up something for them in what they're doing. Whether it's just like elevating their foot to get a deeper range of motion, or like throwing in a, like, the type of row they have is a rotational type of row to work on the T-spine, and I'm pairing that with a T-spine mobility drill because they're so stiff from shoulders to hips that they can't, like, they don't know how to do this. And it's like, so it's really just, there is not anything fancy. It's me looking at what they're presenting with physically and making these small tweaks to address their individual shortcomings that are preventing them from reaching their individual, like, ceiling.
Yeah. I would say, like, you're 6 months, give or take, in from like working with us, although it feels like you've been worked here for like a decade, don't you think? It's just like, you're our guy, so but the reason why it feels like you've worked here for 10 years is because, like, it's a pretty simple formula. We've spent years like, what is the pitching motion? Hitting as well, right? But like, what is the pitching motion? What are the movements inside of the pitching motion? Stop thinking of just like the mechanics of pitching. What is the way in which the body, it needs to absorb force on a single leg. It needs to be able to push off from the ground here. It needs to be able to stabilize while in the air. You need to have length of the arm overhead. Like, you're spending years, like, what is pitching in this foundational movement sense? And then we've gotten to a point where, like, James, here's our assessment, because we know that when athletes are good at this, when they can do these things and they can do this, they get better at pitching. So you, master of designing training in the strength and conditioning floor, get them better at these things. You're like, got it. Like, it's pretty simple. Like, yes, now it's your job to have the craft, and there's a coach in art to, obviously there's a knowledge that's needed to be able to, what creates adaptations, what movement patterns, how do you pair things? There's such a craft in programming, right? And so that's your job, is like, I have the brain for that craft, and we deliver to you of like, this is what pitching is. Make them good at these things. You're like, got it.
And it's so easy because we're all under one roof. Like, Like, so that's why it's so difficult with the external strength program you're doing, because if you're doing it at the school, it's general. You are getting generally stronger, and that's fine. It's better. Like we said, it's better than doing nothing. But then you're going to the fancy pants down the street that,
Right.
they advertise whatever the heck they do. They have no data to influence the decisions they're making in your training program. They have no clue how you play. They've never looked at you under high speed. They've never taken these measurable like data points for you to like map over time. So why are you expecting that, like, with no point of reference, for them to be able to trust them to take you from point A to the point B?
Okay, so James, to that point, you could be out there. You could be an athlete or a parent listening to this, and your daughter's in this situation where you pay this dude over here for strength and conditioning. You pay this lady over here, not to gender stereotype. You can have male or female on either side of things, right? But you this lady over here for pitching lessons. You're pissed at that lady because she hasn't gone up in velocity in 2 years. Meanwhile, strength and conditioning is like, well, she's a rock star over here. She's deadlifting, 300 pounds now. And we're like, well, that's not what correlates to velocity.
Yeah.
Or she's so in shape. She now cut her mile time from this to this. And so basically at the root of why that athlete is not going up in velocity is because of poor strength and conditioning programming. They have made up their own, like, these are the KPIs.
You're just working out over there. Yeah. There's a difference between working out and training for something.
Exactly. And so there's no connection. And so for all you know, what that strength coach told you matters to him, to her. It's not what matters to pitching, right? And so I think the key is, like, yes, under one roof we can see, but is our ability to be like, we now know when this goes up, this gets better, right? So we need to make sure we hire a strength and conditioning coach with a good brain, great programming, it's like XYZ. It's like, you're like, yeah, I got this. And now we know. We're not like, I wonder if James is any good at what he does. It's pretty easy. Everyone gets better in these things. People are going up in this. It's like, now, is it every single athlete who walks through the door gets better? No, because we talked about the other elements of weight, of nutrition. There's so many other things.
Program adherence in general.
Absolutely. Whether or not they've got time to do this, whether or not they've been lifting the same 15, 20-pound dumbbells for, 10 weeks straight. So I'm not saying it's like a magic wand, but as far as, like, are we getting, but we see our athletes where we know those variables are being controlled. It's like, it's not rocket science, but it does take knowing that you're going for the right things, in addition to the person knowing how to program appropriately, right? They're not just going for the, like, social media, let me make sure my stuff looks the coolest in marketing stuff, like, if you're in that world, run. And so I think that, like, if you're like, it looks cool, it looks awesome, I like
bunch of rubber bands and trampolines and
exactly, like, it's like, oh, let me tell you, the newest, hottest, if it's the newest and hottest, whatever, hit the road, right? And so I think of, like, the reality is it's got to be solid in its approach. It's got to be, make sure that it's connected to the skill, not just in power, not just in endurance, not just in those basic concepts, but in the underlying foundational things that make up the movement, right? And it's got to be connected. And we have to understand, as a pitching world, as a softball world, this connection. It's always the pitching coach. We talked about this, of, like, when someone's not going up in velocity, they change pitching coaches. And for all you know, the strength and conditioning program, like, what do you do for strength and conditioning? Like, nothing. I'm like, well, that's why you don't go in velocity. What the hell you want from the pitching coach?
Yeah.
So I just think this world of, if we each have our own jobs, our own world, what does it mean to be really good at designing programming for that athlete in this world? Movement quality, rotation, power, endurance, that exists. And then at the end of the day, if you operate in a silo, it's not great, right? It's not great. And you might be pointing fingers at the wrong route. I think that's the biggest message we can really pass on here.
Mm.
That was good. I'm inspired.
Just another.
Yeah, great job to us. I don't know if anybody's going to listen, but I thought it was great. It's just, I think that it is this sense of, like, false urgency, the sense of you're behind. The 13-year-old travel ball coach is like, you're not going to make my top tier. Newsflash, there's no top tier 13-year-old anything.
Yeah.
Anything. It's made up. It's fake. It is, in the grand scheme of the game, there's no top 8, 10, 12, 13, probably 14-year-old anything. It is all about the gradual build of doing the right thing. And so I think of, like, that is made up by the business powerhouse world of travel ball. It's made up.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, if the biggest thing you can do as a parent out there for your daughter is to keep her out of getting sucked into thinking some sense of urgency, skip the steps because she's got to have this to play for coach such and such. You know what I mean? And it's like, don't skip the steps. Just keep going through the solid pieces of this. And yeah, I mean, and we know we do it best, right? Because of all the reasons that we said. And so it's like, if you don't know, then come get the information.
Yeah.
If you don't know, I'm seeing this coach for this coach for that, I don't know if it's the right thing, then come to us for the information, right? Get an assessment. Do a virtual movement quality assessment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you could even just skip the pitching piece and literally just like, I'm going to do a virtual. I'm not
and
going
you
to
could
leave
pay for
my
that
living room.
And take that to your strength coach and really see what they got and be like, all right, I did an assessment. They say I suck at this, so I'm going to pay you to make me not suck at this. That's what I want.
I think that all the time is like, for anybody out there who's a pitcher trying to go for pitching metrics and they do their own strength and conditioning. Maybe they don't work with us at all. Get a virtual movement assessment associated with power. Let us tell you where your deficiencies are, where your strengths are, and at the very least. And if that coach can't get that better for you, then we know someone who can, right? I think that's just the reality.
Or refuses, because that's just so weird. Like, if you go to somebody and you tell them what you want to be better at, and they're just like, yeah, I'm just going to train you how I train people because I train people like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's like, what?
Run.
Like, somebody's coming to you with something saying exactly, like, they're telling you. How much easier is that than, like, being a personal trainer and being like, I want to lose, like, 10 pounds and, you know, my knee hurts sometimes. And it's like, okay, well. And you show up day one with a chart that says, I just want to work on these qualities. Please make me better at these qualities. And yeah, that would make my job very easy. And it does make my job very easy.
It does. That's exactly what we're saying. You did not come here as a pitching expert.
Yeah.
You did not come here. Like, when I have college consulting calls and they're like, our strength and conditioning, we're missing the mark on this and this. And I'm like, okay, we'll get on the call with James. Not because James has been studying the pitching motion for 10 years. I'm like, no, because when James walked through these doors, we helped him understand the pitching motion. But most importantly, we said to him, these are the things. You have to understand the seasonality of pitching. You have to understand the workload demands of pitching, what it looks like over there. Like, there's education in that. But beyond that, these are the things. We know this already. These are the things. You got it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. At the very least, give that to them. And if they have that information and you can't get better at those things, they're not any good. Go somewhere else.
They don't know what they're looking at or doing.
No, they don't know how to program. That's just around it. They don't know how to program.
They can make a workout, but they can't train you.
I don't have a mic. Drop it. That's it. That's the end. They can make a workout. So can, like, probably the guy hanging out outside of the front lawn right now.
Yeah,
like,
he could start doing some push-ups and sit-ups.
He can make a workout. Yeah. He can YouTube something, but to program for skill and performance, that is an art form, and it takes a lot of knowledge and expertise. Not everybody has it. You just have to know that. Everyone that has, CSCS after their name, masters and whatever, they don't all have the ability to program well. And so it's a really clear, are you getting better at the things that we know matter for the motion? If it's a no, you have to find somebody else. That's just the reality. Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's the end of this one. Crushed it. I love it. I love it because I think making pitching better means uprooting the culture of what we think is true. And it is, as you know, the foundation of my heart is in strength and conditioning. I just love the foundational element of human movement. And I think we've really gone wrong by detaching human movement, the general foundation of human movement, from pitching, treating pitching as if it's like something wildly different in a silo. It's, I think, the number one mistake we've made in our culture. And so I think educating on that is incredibly powerful. So this was a blast. James, I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
That. Yesterday, you were not my friend because we were bowling with our group. And I wanted to beat you so badly, which I became very clear after round 3. I'm like, what am I doing? This is not going to work. I bowled my ass off and I didn't come close. Yesterday, you were not my friend. But today, James, You are. And most days you are, obviously, because you do such a great job for us. So thank
you.
you for being on this podcast today, just to educate, parents out there, coaches, strength coaches, like if you're out here listening to this and you want, give this to your strength coach, tell them to listen to this. And I think it's really, really important that we start to understand, these concepts of what we're going for in pitching and the importance of this connected relationship between the person designing programming and pitching and the person who's designing programming in S&C.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody better, James. Appreciate you very much. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for giving us a piece of your brain, and everyone who is listening, thanks for your time today. We'll see you next week for another episode.